to try to bring some form of answers and closures to the victims of this dreadful tragedy, the parents and family of those children who died. And they're the most important people here, and it's really important that the inquiry can try to bring some type of comfort to those families.
Just a quick note from the Countess of Chester Hospital, who said tonight that they welcome the announcement of an independent inquiry. This is Jane Tompkinson, who is the acting chief executive. She said that the trust will be supporting the ongoing investigation by Cheshire Police. Due to ongoing legal considerations, it would not be appropriate for the trust to make any further comments at this time. In a statement, the hospital's former chief executive, Tony Chambers, mentioned there, he said, "What was shared with the board was honest and open and represented our best understanding of the outcome of the reviews at the time. All of my thoughts are with the children at the heart of this case and their families and loved ones at this incredibly difficult time. I'm truly sorry for what these families have gone through. As chief executive, my focus was on the safety of the baby unit and the well-being of patients and staff. I was open and inclusive as I responded to information and guidance." And the Trust's former medical director, Ian Harvey, says that his comments to the board were true to the best of his knowledge. He says, I wanted the reviews and investigations carried out so that we could tell the patients and the parents what had happened to their children. These are truly terrible crimes, and I'm deeply sorry that this has happened to them. I believe there should be an inquiry that looks at all events leading up to this trial, and I will help with that in whatever way I can. So we now know that there will be an inquiry. Potentially a public inquiry. Calls for that are starting to intensify. How would that work? Let's ask Alun Evans, a former senior civil servant who was secretary to several inquiries, including one into foot and mouth disease. Alun, good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you for being with us. What should an inquiry ask specifically?
I think the inquiry's got to do three overriding things. First, it's got to establish an absolute clear description of the full facts. What was the timeline? What happened when? And why did it take so long to identify Letby? Second, it's got to explain what the critical points of failure were in that timeline, who took what decisions and when, what mistakes were made and by whom. And importantly, it seems to be on the back of that analysis to try and identify lessons to be learned from this, not just the specific ones in this case, but more generally for governance and management in the NHS more widely. But thirdly, and this is probably the most important thing of all, it's to try to bring some form of answers and closures to the victims of this dreadful tragedy, the parents and family of those children who died. And they're the most important people here, and it's really important that the inquiry can try to bring some type of comfort to those families.
Right. Should it be seeking to expose and potentially suggest punishment for people who have done wrong in this case?
Well, it should certainly point out who made the mistakes and why. I don't think it's necessary for them to say what the punishment should be, but it should be absolutely full and fair. It should make sure that nobody is excused from giving evidence, and it needs to get to the truth of this. And it can only do that by a very thorough investigation with a chair of great integrity and a strong, properly funded staff and secretariat to do it.
Right. And should it have the legal power to command people to come and give evidence?
Well, that's obviously a question for the government, and they've chosen to do what's called a non-statutory inquiry rather than a statutory one. You'd have to ask them, but I suspect the reason is that a non-statutory inquiry will be quicker and it will involve less use of lawyers throughout. Now, the risk is that somehow people might not attend, but in my experience, people, if the inquiry is independent and the profile it has, people will attend such an inquiry. I understand that all the key players involved have said they're willing to attend, and the important thing, it seems to me, is to get a quick inquiry that reports within, say, a year. When we did the foot and mouth inquiry, that was a non-statutory inquiry. We spoke to everybody, including the Prime Minister, 3 times. No one refused to speak to us, and we got to lessons learned fairly quickly. The risk is of a statutory inquiry, it can go on for a long time. You've only got to look at the COVID inquiry, which has already been going for over a year, and they haven't even interviewed the Prime Minister. So there is a risk there. I do think, given the severity of this case, that there is a case for getting answers and lessons learned sooner rather than later.